Hey friends, welcome back to Cultural Savage. This week I have the absolute pleasure of introducing you to Justin McRoberts. Justin lives in East San Francisco Bay Area with his wife and two kids. He coaches artists, leaders, and ministers, along with writing books on the practices of prayer and creativity. Justin, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Can you give me like 10 seconds? Not even 3 seconds. I'm going to close that door because I can hear my daughter right there.
You
And I don't
bet.
want
Go
to
for it.
have one of those weird, like, not that they're bad, but I don't want to have one of those moments. So thank you. Not even 10.
Of course.
Far fewer than 10 seconds. Man, I'm stoked. Yeah. You and I have been friends for a long time. We hung out, 8 or 9 years ago in Seattle, right? Was it Seattle or Portland?
It was Portland. Yeah.
Yeah, we connected for coffee and we were like Twitter buddies, like made the whole tweet up thing happen.
Yeah, it was awesome. I've actually been following you personally since like 97, 98 when you came out on 5 Minute Walk.
Way back.
Way back when. So you have been influential in my life in a lot of different ways. And it was really good to connect with you and to become friends. That was really cool. So yeah.
I appreciate that. Happy
Of
to.
course. Well, so for people that haven't been stalking you for 20 years now, why don't you share a little bit of your story? Just who you are, where you're at, how you got there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I live in Martinez, California with my wife and I've got two kids. We've been married for 21 years and we've got a 10-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. I was born around here. So I'm from here. So I was born in Oakland, which is 25 minutes that way, which is right over the water from San Francisco. Went to college out here. Just stayed. I played music for a number of years. 98, 99, bonkers with a bunch of stuff. So I got married. I planted a church in Concord, where I was born, where I grew up, and I got married, planted a church, and started a music career all within about like 6-7 months of each other.
Wow.
Yeah. And all those things, they're fine. they're all still rolling. And so I played music for a long time and enjoyed it and loved it and still enjoy music. But it turns out like I talk a lot in between songs, develop relationships, and that became these more like mentorship type things. And I would go do retreats. And that became more of the sort of coaching things. So I've had this long evolved, not that long. I've had this like 20-year evolved vocational journey process. My wife traveled with me for the first 10 years. And then the road's just different on women a lot of the time. And so before she burned out, we were like, hey, let's not. So I started traveling less. I'm pickier about the stuff I do. She's on staff with Young Life.
Okay.
So she mentors and disciples adolescents. And that's me, man. I write books now and do as much teaching and storytelling as I possibly can, and also coach artists and ministers and leaders.
That's awesome. Yeah, it definitely has been a natural progression for you. I see some people sort of jump ship in the middle to something else and then they land and it works, but yours definitely has been this gradual progression, which has been cool to see. Now, I mean, throughout everything, creativity has been sort of your jam.
Yep.
I'm curious, in your journey, how has creativity manifested itself, like physically? Not just like, not just like, yeah, I was creative here and I was creative here and I was creative for this album, but like physically, like what were some creative moments? What were some creative things that happened for you?
Yeah, sure. So the book I just turned in is going to be like, literally, this is the theme of that book. And it's called, the book's called It Is What You Make of It. And the idea is that given almost any given moment, my set of circumstances are not an end, but they're like, that's the material I have to work with for the next moment. So a lot of the folks, if you've been around from it, like I lost my dad to depression and suicide a bunch of years ago. And instead of that just being a sad moment in time, the question after a time, I mean, for a while it just sucks and hurts and all that. But after a time, the question on the table is, so what do I like? What do I do with like the pain in me? What do I do with the absence there? What do I do with the story and the confusion? Like, so the way creativity is embodied for me is I'm always having to and choosing to ask the question, what do I do with this? So that I'm never a slave to my circumstances. I'm never a slave to my setup. Like, I'm always asking the question, what do I do? So the story, I do this all the time. So the story, Sisyphus, that people tell, he tried to steal fire and the gods put him in this big like concave thing or whatever. And he was cursed to push this rock up to the, but it would never push it over the edge. So it would always roll back down. That was his curse.
Yeah.
And like, my deal was like, well, so what can, like, if here are your limitations, like you've got a rock and just crap tons of time. So what are you going to do now? What do you do with that? So in other words, like, that's a story that's supposed to be about being stuck. In a sense, it's like, well, everyone's stuck. Like, everyone's got limitations. Everyone's going to have crap that they're facing. Everyone's going to feel cursed by the gods in some way, shape, or form. So what do you do with that? What do you do with your depression? What do you do with your divorce? What do you do with like the deadbeat dad thing? What do you do? What do you do with that? At some point, that's the question I want to push folks to ask. And so I have to embody that with the way I live. I don't want to just make stuff and art's cute. But no, art is a way to actually reinvent my life fundamentally, like, completely.
Yeah.
Is how I would answer that question.
Do you think that, okay, so a lot of artists take their experiences and translate it into communication for other people, whether it's visual or audio or written or whatever. Do you think that the idea of working with what you have is that sort of translation piece, or is it something different, like how you process before you can even bring this experience to the table?
No, I think the process stuff is different. So art, the way I understand art, has to do is it's more purposeful. So my internal processes are not art in and of themselves. So like, how should I say this? The difference between art and journaling is this. Like, so art is a thing I do. Art is if I create something and it comes in contact with someone else's life. Anything I create that facilitates a connection between people. This is what Seth Godin says about art, and I buy this. Anything that I create that facilitates a connection between people. That could be a person in themselves. That could be a person in God. That could be a person in other people. Whatever I create that facilitates a connection between people is art. So that's where, like, the culinary arts, food, one of the world's great arts. But the consciousness there of connection with other people is actually the definitive element of art. Because if I'm just writing, no, I shouldn't say just, if I'm writing or singing or typing or building because I need to like facilitate something in myself and I'm just trying to process, that's journaling, and that's fine. That's for me. That's for me. But if I want to make it art, then it has to become about someone else. And so I think there is a difference where, like, people who paint or draw or, sing or whatever in grief or in joy, it's a way for them to internally process. That same thing becomes art when I'm able to or willing to or desirous of connecting this work with other people for the sake of further connection.
Okay. So that process, how does your physical body get involved in that process? I mean, I'm thinking specifically of like, okay, like a death, like a trauma, right? You have this, and trauma lives in your body. That's sort of a general accepted idea now, which is very true. But how does your body come in contact with that process, especially when there's those deep wounds that you're processing?
Yeah. So I have to intentionalize that. I mean, the way I'm trained around, I'm trained, my expectations of art making are very here,
Mm-hmm.
like specifically like writing now, what I do mostly, I mostly write.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the thing that happens here in my head.
Yeah.
So intentionalizing my embodiment of that means like, so you're in my office space, and this is the place where I do like busy work,
Mm-hmm.
and I try not to do creative work here. So if I'm going to do creative work, I move into a space over there, where
Okay.
they're set up, and it's like a different space. So I put my body in a different like place physically,
Yeah.
in order to actually be physically different and differently postured for the work of creativity. I also, there isn't for me a massive leap or jump between um, my like what's happening in my body and what I'm doing creatively. So I have to work in, like I wake up at like 4:30 or 4:45 every day so that I can get in this office and sit in that chair and write until my family wakes up around 6:30, 6:45, 7 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, like which I haven't gotten to pull off today, like I will get outside and I will exercise in some way, shape, or form. Both things have to be true. And if I'm not physically well, if I don't exercise well, my art sucks. So which is an intent, like I have to physically take care of myself,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm going to be better off. So that's another intentionalization. And I can't draw, I mean, I can sort of just kind of fake draw the lines where like, well, if I'm in a better place and endorphins and the whole nine, and there's something to that, but also like, how should I say this? As I'm jogging or working out or whatever, I'll keep my phone on. I got my phone on me all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff pops into my noggin pretty regularly while I'm jogging, just because there's my body's engaged, my mind is hearing things differently,
Mm-hmm.
and I capture. So this, I capture thoughts and prompt. So the book after this one, it's going to be about work and rest. Probably 80% of it was generated, at least the sort of the seeds of each chapter were generated while exercising.
Okay.
Thoughts I had, like these moments of clarity while jogging or lifting something. And I was like, oh, there's a really, really clear thought. And it's accessible to me because I'm using my body. I get that
Yeah.
stuff and it pops up because that's how it works, right? It's like these moments of inspiration.
Yeah.
I don't get those moments of inspiration just sitting on my ass. Like I just never have. I'm active. I'm in conversation with people, but normally like I'm moving,
Yeah.
hiking, walking, biking, lifting, whatever. And like stuff pops into my head and now I capture it. I access that stuff by way of exercise, which then leads back to, because that's true, I need to make sure that my body recognizes that it's also time now to work on those things that it fed me earlier. Like now
Right.
we're going to actually put me physically into a position to capture those things and hunker down and make.
Yeah.
That's how my body ends up involved.
Nice. Nice. So what about old art? Like,
Yeah, same more.
what about old art? How have you grown out of it though? How has your body like changed? Like for me, there's like I used to write songs
Uh-huh.
and I used to lead them in church. And when I go back and I sing them, I have a different feeling in my body than I did when I wrote them. What's that
Yeah,
like? What happens when you grow out of your art?
it's a good question. So I mean, I don't know all the time. So there's definitely work of mine that I don't identify with anymore, and
Hmm.
there's definitely work of mine that like I don't like anymore.
Right.
Um, so I don't know, man. I mean, it's an odd bit of self realization. It's part of maturity to some degree. Is like I don't like who I was. That's
Hmm.
not the only part of maturity. Like that shouldn't be the only reason I continue to grow. But if I'm, yeah, I think I mean this. There's work that I don't like that I used to do, and there's work that I don't associate myself with as much that I used to do, and both of those are ways I know that I've grown. And so if I looked back over the course of my career and I was just happy with everything I had done, it probably would be an indication that I had not actually grown and was challenged and matured, I think. And I don't
That makes
know,
sense.
because my experience has very much been like, I don't like that anymore. I used to love doing that song. I used to love telling that story. I wish I would have never told that story. That's not a great story to tell. And God, that song's in the world and people know it. Yeesh.
Yeah.
That is for me a way. I'm just thinking about this mostly now. That is for me a way I think I can recognize my own growth. Is that there's stuff that I don't like about what used to be. The other side of the coin is, from where I'm at now, there's work that I did then that I know was as good as it was. There's stuff that, like, I look back and be like, oh snap, that was fantastic. Like, I really should have invested more in that project or more in that song, but I didn't see it for its complexities because I just didn't have
Right.
I didn't have the mindset for it.
Right. You didn't have that space to look back on it and see, oh, there's something to this that I should have dug into, that whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Something like that.
So I'm really curious about your body. Like, I've started a job recently where I throw freight. I throw produce around, like 50-pound boxes of cabbage, which is a lot of cabbage. Let's just be
Yeah.
honest.
It's a lot of cabbage.
And I've noticed myself when I'm doing that, my mind's going and it's working, and then I sit down, and instead of being tired, my mind is going. And you mentioned how you almost process your creativity through your body and through what goes on. How does it feel when it comes out? Like, is there a release? Is there a relief? Is it what happens when the creativity goes somewhere?
Hmm. I think I feel it more so in relationships than I do in art making. I think there's that story in the Gospels about Jesus walking down the road. There's a massive crowd of people, and he's being jostled around by the crowd. And then this one particular person who's had this problem with her body for a long time reaches out and touches his coat or his jacket or his the hem of his garment, whatever the thing is. And he stops and he looks around and he's like, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are like, "Bro, everyone touched you. This is like it's a mob. It's a crowd. Everyone's running. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And then he says the line, "I know the power has gone out from me." More so in relationships, I feel that where like in coaching, I'll come to the end of a coach and I'm with it all day. I'm there, I'm present. And then once I've given myself a few minutes to flip the switch and I'm done, like I'm not exhausted, but I feel tired the way I would feel at the end of a workout. There's this elation and this sort of drive in the workout, and like, I'm going to finish this last set. I'm going to get this thing over my head. I'm going to round that turn. I'm going to finish that last quarter mile. Like, it's there. And then at the end, like a little while after you're done with the workout, there's often like a little bit of a high. And there's oftentimes this, like, it's not like a low. It's just like my body just relaxes. I could lay down and take a nap. And I sort of feel that. I feel that somewhat with art making and with writing. Not as much anymore. I think it was a lot different with songs because my emotional relationship to a song is different. Like melody, like when the melody clicks and I feel it in my chest, like, oh, that's the freaking jam. That's the one right there.
Yeah.
I feel it differently with writing. There's more, it's a deeper feeling with writing. It's just not as cathartic, I think is what I mean. There's a catharsis, emotional, physical catharsis where like I'm playing the song and I find the place, singing the lyrics, and so my body is involved the entire time of the song. Whereas like I know, like, I'm typing while I'm writing, but it's mostly happening in my heart and my head. But I do feel at times like when things do land, that sort of like rush of sorts in my body. It's just a little bit deeper, more subtle now than it used to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's take this towards a spiritual bent. Creativity and spirituality. And the reason I say spirituality, in relation to body is because we are spiritual beings. We're not
Yes.
ethereal beings. We just have, we're not spiritual beings that live in a body. We are body, we are spirit, we are,
Yep.
right? So how does this bodily creativity touch in the spiritual in you?
Um, I think it's probably helpful for me to define when I think about what spiritual is. So, um, I think what is spiritual is, uh, when we talk in terms of spirituality, what is spiritual about a human being? Spiritual is the consideration of my entire life as being in relationship to the divine. So, in other words,
Mm-hmm.
my social life, my financial life, my sex life, my work life, my rest life, like whatever, like all which I'll divide it up. Consider myself one whole person, including my body, as in relationship with the divine. I think that's what makes. I think that's what spiritual is.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not this stuff, and then there's the spiritual. But
Right.
to think spiritually is through my entire life, top to bottom, every square inch, as being in, existing in relationship to the divine. Abraham Kuyper says that there's not one square inch in all of the human experience over which Christ, who is sovereign, does not cry mine.
Mm-hmm.
That's spiritual thought for me. Like everything belongs to Christ and is in Christ.
Yeah.
The way insofar as like I practice that in, with music, like with music, the playing and the songs, it's an
Right.
embodiment of realities and expressions. That's a spiritual act because I'm giving my body over in that way.
Mm-hmm.
In storytelling, I'm standing and I'm talking and using my mouth. So it's more a matter of, like, for me, the spiritual element of this the spiritual element. I just did it. The more thinking about this spiritually has more to do with like the inclusion and the consideration of these things as being in relationship with the divine.
Yeah.
That when I put something, when I I try to publish something every single day. So when I publish something to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, what I believe and choose to believe and choose to practice in my mind is that there will be some sort of divine encounter with other people who receive and take this into their hearts, their minds, their bodies, and it'll kind of move things, on the other side of the country, other side of the world.
Yeah.
That's, to me, spiritual thought, that this is purposeful. It will have relationship with other folks. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean by spiritual, if that makes some sense, I hope.
It does. No, it definitely makes sense. It's the idea of wholly relating to the divine, not relating to the divine through some magical, mystical. I mean,
Yes.
mystical experiences happen, but they still involve your body. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So,
Yeah.
what about other people? What about the community? Like, what role does the
Mhm.
community play in both the creativity, spirituality? I mean, that whole mess of stuff. And what
Yeah.
role does the community play in you embodying that? Not just for the community, but for yourself.
Yeah. That's been tricky for me because I don't live in an industry town or like a super artsy part of America. Not that it's not, but I'm in this area and all that kind of stuff. But like, I don't live in, like, it's a tech town, right? San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco is like, it's a tech town, and Oakland, Berkeley's more like it's an academic town, and then you've got Silicon Valley, which is like, again, more tech and internet kind of stuff. So like, I could have earlier in life like moved to Nashville to do music, or Los Angeles. Um, the choice, though, was to be in a place where my role, my job, wasn't as definitive in my relationships, where people just liked, where people just liked and cared about us because we were us,
Mm-hmm.
and that there wasn't shop talk. That when we were around with friends, it was like, it's neat, you got a record, but it's not like that's who you are, if that makes some sense.
Yeah.
So I think the health of some of the health of my work over the course of time has been because my wife and I chose to root ourselves in a place that wasn't centered on my creativity,
Mm.
that was just interpersonal, and that my creative life was part of who I was, but most of the relationships we have, and most of the conversations in those relationships were more everyday kind of conversations. That's not exactly how I want to say that, but something along those lines. Like, these people don't care. Like, there's no like, no one's counting numbers in terms of like record sales or book sales. It's like,
Right.
you have a job, you're an author. Great, I'm a fireman. Cool, how you doing?
Hmm.
And that's been grounding, I think. The way that the community has, the primary way my community has played a role in my creativity is that my creativity and my creative work gets expression of who I am, but that who I am as a person is more fundamentally and fully received on just a kind of a rudimentary human level.
Mm.
So I don't ever feel like I'm trying to prove anything or be better than anyone. Like, I'm the only guy I know. Well, I guess Matt is now, but like, I'm the only one of my friends around here writing books.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make me special. It's just like, I have a job. He's a pastor. This guy's the fireman. This guy coaches pro athletes. Like, we got stuff we're doing. This guy owns a CrossFit gym.
Yeah.
Those are our lives. And there's just something more, well, for me, there's a humanity available to me in that kind of community that I think has made my work better and more relatable than it would have been if I'd have gone to Nashville.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is your relationships are accepting your humanity, not your productivity.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that's a great way to say that.
That's neat. I think
I like it.
we get really caught up in our productivity. What do you do? How do you do this? And especially creative people, because it involves our lives. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't really turn off, like, you'll be sitting there hanging out with friends and something clicks in your mind and you're like, I got to remember that for later. You don't really
Yep.
turn it off.
No,
Um,
never. No, pretty much never.
yeah, yeah. So community,
Mm-hmm.
other than accepting you, how's community built into you?
I mean, I served as a pastor for 20 years.
Yeah.
Uh, it's built into me from, like, structurally, my role has generally been to be a help and to be a guide, so it's built into me. Really, I should say, like, I'm built into my communities most often from a leadership perspective, and it
Mm-hmm.
has a lot to do with what I'm able to bring to the table and offer. It feels very much like a non-negotiable. I should say, like, it's not an option for me to being in community is not an option. Being in community is a necessity. It's a vital
Mm.
practice. Like, yes, I do. I belong here. This is part of who I am.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I did a project called the CMYK project, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It's
Mm-hmm.
based on the concept of the project was rooted in print color process. And the idea was and is with print color process that, all of the colors in and of themselves, if you just had cyan, there would be no cyan, because it's definitive is that it's related to other colors that are not itself. That's how you know it's cyan, is that it's not magenta, yellow, or black.
Mm-hmm.
So it has its identity in relationship to things that are not like it. That's one element, and I understand that as a way we have one another as definitive of our identities. It's like, you are not me, and because you're not me, I get to be me. So I know who I am in relationship to people who are not like me, who are not me. And then similarly, if cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, if you use all four colors in process, you can literally print any color
Yeah.
imaginable. But if you remove one element at all, if you want one cyan, magenta, yellow, black, if it's just cyan, yellow, and black, you get no, it ruins. Absolutely, it looks awkward, it's off, you can't get to it. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea that it's necessary. Like, you actually have to have each of these things in place. So my role, it's a gift to be able to be in community. I would go so far as to say it's also a necessity. You're necessary. It's like, yeah, it's great. It's wonderful. It's a gift to be able to be with one another. I would push that further and say it is necessary for you to be present with the people you've been given to, because their lives will be diminished if you don't. And yours will be diminished if you don't show up as well. I just think
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah. So living robustly, living fully, living spiritually
Mm-hmm.
needs community.
Yes, very much so.
I like that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. So let me ask you this. This is my
Yeah.
absolute favorite question to ask people.
Great. I'm ready for favorites.
In light of what we've talked about, in light of creativity, spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
community, embodying this stuff, in light of all this, what does it actually do to your articulation of the gospel?
So one of my mentors, Mike McCoy, talks about like, there's the gospel and then there's my gospel,
Mm-hmm.
and that part of what I've been trained in as in like culturally and historically as a creator is that how should I say this? I can only know so much of the story. I can only attend to so much of or take in so much of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's just like what we were talking about in terms of CMYK and necessity. I get to tell my part, like the thing that I can see, like, and because it's the thing that I can see and I'm uniquely positioned where I'm positioned in my world, I have a responsibility to tell it. Because if I don't
Mm-hmm.
tell that part of it, then it goes untold. And that becomes part of the whole truth. So does Jesus look the same in Martinez, California, as he does in Seattle, Washington? No. Does Jesus look the same in a as manifest in the love of a family of color as Jesus looks in the love of a family of a more privileged family in Silicon Valley or San Francisco? Is one of those more Jesus than another? No. So I have to tell my story I have to and get to tell my story from my perspective in the ways that I understand. I have to tell the truth as much as I can see the truth. I have to describe the truth and describe Christ as much as I possibly can from where I'm standing, because I'm the one standing there. And if there is going to be a fuller, more cosmic expression or understanding of Jesus, of Christ and the gospel, it's not going to be because it won't be because someone found like the one strategic point in all of human history and culture upon which they can stand and see the whole thing. It will instead be because enough of us said, I can only see so much, but she sees it this way, and there's got to be something there too. And they see it this way, and this is complex and wonderful and beautiful, and it's bigger than me, which is what the gospel should feel like and seem like. So I have to do what I do in order to help, and so do you, in order to help actually paint the larger, more accessible picture of Christ and to actually preach the whole gospel, because none of us can see the whole thing from where we're standing. We need other people to do that.
So how do you help your community embody that task?
I ask a lot of questions. I ask most of what I do, most of what I've done as a pastor is I'm not a great leader in the traditional sense in pastoral leadership, or wasn't. I'm not a pastor anymore. I was. And so far as like, I don't have great plans that we're going to go execute. We're going to go like kick ass, take names for Jesus sort of a thing. We're going to go take territory. And
Right.
I was just never great at that stuff, which is fine. What I was good at and wanted to get great at, and I'm getting better now, is tending to like what's actually happening in you, what's going on, what's happening in you. It's the difference between the more Pauline execution of ministry, in which Paul goes places, has a plan, executes the plan, disciples, builds, moves on. Great, awesome, not my bag of chips. Philip is sent to a chariot. Actually, Philip sent down a road without a strategic plan at all. Go south. And on his go south, he runs into a chariot. And in the chariot is an Ethiopian eunuch reading Isaiah. And the last thing he hears from the Spirit of the Lord in the story is go to that chariot and stay near it. That's it. That's the end of the story. Or that's the end of the Spirit speaking to Philip in the story. So what Philip does, he goes and he stands there, and he stands there long enough to listen and to pay attention and to hear that the word of God is already active and alive in that chariot, as opposed to like, this is an Ethiopian eunuch in a chariot. There's nothing about this person's life or history or circumstances that has resonance with Philip. They're not even the same kind of masculine, because it's a eunuch. So there's no commonality. So Philip has to stand there long enough to listen and pay attention. And then once Philip has heard the word of God active and alive there, then what Philip does is start asking questions. And the first question he asks is, do you understand what it is you're reading? And the brother says, how could I possibly understand it unless someone explains it to me?
Yeah.
So how do I help people embody the notion that their perspective, their experience of Christ matters? I have to ask a lot of questions. And then when they get to see it, and they're like, oh shit, that really is Jesus. Like, that's awesome. I want that.
Yeah.
Then then they get to pass that on, and then like their gospel becomes like more, there's more confidence in their gospel. So they're not telling some story about, hey, did you know Jesus died on a cross for your sins and was raised from the dead? And if folks are like, I've heard that a million times, it has no resonance whatsoever with my life.
Yeah.
But instead, like, I can preach my gospel and tell you how like there's this process of death and sadness and resurrection in that, and it resonates. We get to tell my gospel, but I have to believe that gospel first, which is part of how I've tried to lead, which is like I try to help people by asking questions, believe the gospel as it's manifest and active in their lives, as opposed to just the story, because they already know the story.
Yeah. It's taking the story and saying, how is the story true in you? And can you believe that?
Yep.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, Justin, you have been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so
Man,
much.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Glad to.
So if people want to find you and stalk you on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, how do they find you?
Sure. Just search my name, Justin McRoberts. That's you'll find me anywhere. Facebook. I'm mostly Instagram, Facebook, and I spend some time on Twitter now. I don't spend as much time as I used to on Twitter just because it got super sideways for me.
Yeah.
It can be a beautiful place, but so can Detroit. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I'm around, or you can just jump to justinmcroberts.com and you can bounce to any of those sources from there.
Awesome. And make sure that you do check out the books.
Man.
CMYK was fantastic. Just absolutely.
Dude, thank you.
I just got to say, it really was. The one on the Lord's Prayer, the name escapes me right now.
The more recent one called May It Be So.
Yeah, May It Be So. Beautiful again.
Dude, thank you.
Check this stuff out, guys. Seriously, I really appreciate what Justin does. I want you to appreciate it too. So, Justin, thank you again.
Man. Thanks, bro.